To do long division, like in 587 divided by 4, you start by thinking about how many times can 4 go into 5? One time. 1 times 4 is 4. What do you do with that 5 and 4? You subtract them. That gives you 1 left over. Then we drop down the 8. How many times does 4 go into 18? 3, 4, 4 times? 4 times 4 is 16. So we write, when we do 4 times 4, we write that underneath the 18. Subtract, that gives us 2 left over. Bring down our 7. How many times does 4 go into 27? 6 times, which 6 times 4 is 24. We have a remainder of 3. Now in elementary school, we would write 146 remainder 3. As we got into middle school, did you learn what to do with that remainder? You have to make it either a decimal or you can use it as a fraction. And 3 over 4. So 146 and 3/4. You always put the remainder over the divisor. All right, now let's divide with a polynomial. I'm going to be referring to cycles. Like, whoa. In this long division problem, this is a cycle. And then you drop down the 8. You do 4 into 18. That's your second cycle. Then 4 into 27. That's your third cycle. So each of those is a cycle, and you kind of repeat the steps. We're going to be repeating steps and doing a couple cycles to get through this. So the first thing I want you to do is think about x and x to the third. How many times can x go into x to the third? Or a better way to think of it as x times what would give you x to the third? X times x squared. Now just like we did in the numerical example, do x squared times x. That gives us x to the third. But we also have this minus 1 here. So we are also going to do x squared times negative 1, negative 1 x squared. So x times what is x to the third? And then multiply that by x minus 1 and write it underneath. Take a guess. What do you think we're going to do with those 4 terms right there? What are we going to do right here? Subtract them. X to the third minus x to the third. That should cancel. That first part should always cancel. If it doesn't, you did something wrong. Then we have negative x squared minus a negative 1x squared, which should be plus. It cancels, which is not common, but oh well, we'll deal with it. Then we would bring down negative 2x and start a new cycle. X times what would give us negative 2x? Negative 2. And again, we're going to do negative 2 times x minus 1 and write it underneath. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. Do you see this kind of naked hole right here? If you ever see something like that, just drag that 8 down also. That happened because both of our things in the first cycle canceled, which doesn't always happen. Okay, again, we are going to subtract. You have to subtract both of that second thing from the first thing. Negative 2x minus a negative 2x. That should cancel. If it doesn't, you did something wrong. What is 8 minus 2? 6. Is there anything else for us to pull down? No. So this is our remainder. Our answer is x squared minus 2 plus 6 over x minus 1. Put the remainder over the divisor and write that at the end. Now, what does this mean? This means if we take x squared minus 2 plus 6 over x minus 1 and multiply it by x minus 1, we will end up with x to the third minus x squared minus 2x plus 8. In example 2, is there a missing exponent? We start with x to the third and then go straight to 4x. X squared is missing in there. So anytime there's a missing exponent, you need to add in a ghost term as a placeholder where that term should go. So when we set this up, we have negative 3x to the third plus 0x squared plus 4x minus 1. We are dividing that by x minus 1. Okay, step 1. X times what gives us negative 3x to the third? So we're looking for this thing right here. X times what would give us negative 3x to the third? We need a negative 3 in there. And to get x to go up to x to the third, we need x squared. Multiply that by x minus 1. So you're multiplying that term, negative 3x squared, to both the x and the negative 1, and write that down below. So negative 3x squared times x is negative 3x to the third. Negative 3x squared times negative 1 is positive 3x squared. We subtract, and I like to put parentheses around the one on the bottom with a minus sign to remind me that you have to subtract both of them regardless of what signs are in there. Negative 3x to the third minus negative 3x to the third, that cancels. It should cancel. If it doesn't, you did something wrong. What about the next part? 0x squared minus 3x squared. Negative 3x squared. Okay, next step. Bring down the next term. So our 4x is going to come down and join the negative 3x squared. Now we start the second cycle. X times what is going to give us negative 3x squared? We need a negative 3. And how do you make x become x squared? Multiply it by an x. So negative 3x is what we put up there. Multiply that by x minus 1, by the divisor. So negative 3x times x is negative 3x squared. Negative 3x times negative 1 is positive 3x. Subtract. That first term should go away. What is 4x minus 3x? 1x. You don't have to put the plus, you don't even have to put the 1, but I find it helpful. Then your next step is to bring down that negative 1. Then we start the next cycle. X times what is going to give us positive 1x? 1. So we put plus 1 up here. Multiply by x minus 1. 1 times x is 1x. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And subtract. What happens when we subtract? The first one cancels like it's supposed to. The second one also cancels. this one doesn't have a remainder. So on this particular example, our answer is negative 3x squared minus 3x plus 1. This means that if we were to do x minus 1 times negative 3x squared minus 3x plus 1, we would get the answer of the stuff that's under the division thingy of what we started with. Negative 3x squared plus 4x minus 1. Okay? So first, x times what will give you x to the third? That would be x squared. Multiply x squared to x and 3 and write that underneath. That would give you x to the third plus 3x squared. We need to subtract both of those from the terms above them. X to the third minus x to the third, that cancels, which is what it's supposed to do. 0x squared minus 3x to the third is negative 3x squared. To start the next cycle, you bring down the next term, negative 4x, and then start the cycle again. X times what would give you negative 3x squared? Well, we need the negative 3 in there. And x times x gives us x squared, so that needs to be negative 3x. Multiply that negative 3x times x and 3. Negative 3x times x is negative 3x squared. Negative 3x times 3 is negative 9x. Subtract. First term cancels like it's supposed to. Negative 4x minus a negative 9x is positive 5x. You have to use that subtraction for both of those terms. So negative 4 minus a negative 9, that would be negative 4 plus 9, so positive 5x. Next cycle, bring down the positive 6. X times what would give us 5x? Positive 5. Multiply that positive 5 to x and 3. 5 times x is 5x. 5 times 3 is 15. Subtract. 5x minus 5x cancels. What is 6 minus 15? Negative 9. Negative 9 is our remainder. So our final answer is x squared, this is up at the very top, x squared minus 3x plus 5. The remainder, we do minus 9 over x plus 3. The remainder goes over the divisor at the end.